My name is Boulevard here for giantslayertv to go over with you the long-anticipated patch 3.4 balance update for A Curious Journey. There's a lot to go over, so I do want to dive right in, but first I want to highlight an important competitive update. The in-client tournament tab has been updated to reflect the proper seasonal tournament dates, which are May 14th for the open rounds and May 21st for the playoffs, so you've got a month and a half to experiment with this patch and prepare for the championship. Before we get into the updates, we're actually getting 3 new cards which are being introduced to address some of the weaker areas of some regions' core identities that Riot felt they couldn't concisely cover just with updating existing cards. The first one is Desert Duel, a defensive Shurima spell. For 3 mana at slow speed, you can give one enemy -2 attack, and then it and an ally strike each other. This card is being introduced to give Shurima a little single target removal outside of vulnerable that doesn't require you to be down a mana crystal. Overall, the playability of this card seems questionable. It might be a fringe tool for Sivir Akshan as single combat can be awkward for the deck and its low base health units, or in Nasus decks as a way to off-turn level him without risking a champion spell. Personally, however, I'm not really optimistic for either. This card doesn't seem unplayable, but finding a deck that likes it and has space is going to be difficult. Targon is getting Celestial Wonder, a 5-mana fast spell that stuns 2 enemies. It's straightforward enough, a fast speed Crescent Strike that you can main deck. Yeah, it's just got the Celestial name, it's not actually a Celestial card, and the card is fine. It's a solid 5 out of 10, though there are other things happening in this balance patch that may influence its play rate. And then finally we have Rocket Barrage, a slow speed 5-mana Piltover and Zon spell. You deal 3 damage to an enemy and 1 to all other enemies, and based on wording of other cards like Ebb, I'm led to believe that you cannot target the enemy Nexus with this. Still, Piltover and Zon does have some board-wide pings already like Chempunk Shredder, so this is on theme, and the card that I'm most hopeful for among the ones being added. Again, however, one has to wonder exactly what deck this card will find its home into, as ironically it's too cheap for a Jace deck, but maybe something like Tribeam Control can take advantage of it in combo with Flash Bombs and Execute spells that the deck already runs. There were a considerable amount of buffs and nerfs in this patch, so rather than go in the writing order, I'm going to go over all of the nerfs first, and then I am going to go over all of the buffs. At least after I get over this first change, which is a buff and a nerf, and the first in the writing order. So, Moon Weapons are going back to 2 mana, which is a major buff for Aphelios as he is now back to his on-release numbers. Gifts from Beyond is being reverted to 2 mana, so that Gifts and a Gun is still 4 mana, and the trade-off to get Aphelios here is that Crescendum will no longer summon a 2-drop from your deck, and will instead randomly summon one from your regions. There's a few implications for this. First off, this is the biggest nerf to Lee Sin that I can remember, as you no longer summon Eye of the Dragon from your deck. Lee was a top-tier deck before the printing of Moon Weapons, so I'm sure he'll be fine, but the game has evolved a lot since then, and he may be ushering in a new era of Lee Sin experimentation, as the current builds heavily revolve around the 6 Eye of the Dragon playstyle. As for Aphelios himself, his time in the spotlight was extremely brief and riddled with other problem cards, so I would say that first to quell your fears of an Aphelios takeover. Obviously, we no longer have the Crescendum build around for Boxtopus, which I'm fine with, as I think it was the least interesting thing about Aphelios. What concerned me more was the stall that he added into a game with Gravitum and Calibrum, but that was also heavily facilitated by Veiled Temple. A 10/10 or larger Aphelios was commonplace and made it very difficult to attack your opponent, as your largest unit was likely stunned by Gravitum, and your champions couldn't attack through the behemoth of a champion that was a Veiled Temple to Aphelios, and usually while you were stalled out in this manner, a Zoe or Twisted Fate was threatening a level up in the background. We've never gotten to experience Aphelios with 2-mana guns without Veiled Temple, and the health buff was such an integral part of that I'm confident we won't go back to that style of game specifically. Instead, my eyes move more toward Fated units, who now have an unlimited supply of Infernum and Severum, but only time will really tell what the best way to play the champion is, though I'm very confident he will propel himself to the forefront of the meta immediately and have the most different decks built around him, as he is a community favorite by a landslide. Okay. Now for the nerfs. Gnar is losing an attack at level 1, and honestly, I'm having a little trouble understanding what's happening to his level 2 side. Currently, he's a 6/5, and it says that he's going from a 5/4 to a 4/4, but they also said they want to make a small change to tone him down without making him feel un-mega, leading me to believe we're settling on a 5/4 Gnar for the time being. I don't think anyone is surprised to see a slap on the wrist for Gnar, who has played aggressively and did utility a little bit too well, and hopefully this makes players think a little harder about whether Gnar is really best in slot for their Bandle City or Freljord deck, but the answer will probably still mostly be yes, it's Gnar. Pantheon and Pyke are each also losing an attack, but given that they're both champions whose attack stat is a lot more fluid than Gnar, they're not going to feel it as badly, but it certainly will be felt. With Lurk consistently being a top 5 ladder performer, it's not unexpected that a nerf would come through. I guess some people may be asking why now, to which I have no answer. Pantheon, on the other hand, was already a top performer who has been overachieving a little since the release of Yuumi, so now seems like the perfect time to knock him down a peg. Xerxai Dunebreaker is losing a health, which if you don't recognize it by the name is the 6-mana Overwhelm Lurker. Again, a change made to give other decks some room to shine on ladder, but not backbreaking for the archetype, ideally. Darkness has been a tournament staple since its release, but has recently taken over ladder as well, leading to an attack reduction on Twisted Catalyzer, which again, if you don't know the names, this is the one that strikes and increases the damage of Darkness. Then Vanguard Sergeant is losing the additional health that he got in patch 2.18 that pushed him to the staple status in most mid-range Demacia decks. Now the phenomenon of card isn't played, card is buffed, buff is reversed, the card is still played is one I'm familiar with, but it's unlikely to be the case here. As nice as the 4 Demacia has been, the mainstream mid-range Demacia decks like Scouts and Sivir Akshan have a lot of 3-drops to choose from, and without 4 health, it's unlikely that Sergeant gets to stay on the front lines. Now for the nerfs everyone's been asking for, Conchologist is losing a health down to a 2-1, while Loping Telescope is gaining a health and a cost, making it a 3-mana 2-2. The journey to make Bandle City Manifest cards perfectly balanced between value, stats, and cost is likely to be a long one, but the big offenders are being made an example of this patch. Telescope's cost increase is especially important as it was easy to spam alongside both Bandle City Mare and Gleaming Lantern, while boasting some of the largest swings in Runeterra at the moment. Other decks are going to have to carefully consider if a 3-mana Telescope is something they can justify in the deck building process, as Telescope can have some rough hits within the pools it offers up. For Targon decks, Telescope may now look like a less consistently good Solari Priestess, though Bandle City decks, and especially ones that play Mare, will still likely include the Telescope. No core card was safe from this patch, as Sharpsight and Twin Discipline both join the chopping block and lose an attack each, making Sharpsight +1/+2 and Twin +2 attack or +3 health. Sharpsight has been around so long that I can't remember what Demacia decks actually played before it, but it's a nice quality of life nerf that won't impact the play rate, as 2 of the most prominent Demacia decks in Sivir Akshan and Pantheon are all about self-targeting anyway. Then, decks like Scouts and Demacia Yordles and Arms likely still care enough about the health boost on their backline units like Gleaming Lantern or Misfortune that they're not going to cut it either, making this a really, really good change. As for Twin Discipline, Ionia is nowhere near as prevalent, but every time a new powerful Ionia deck arose, Twin was an auto-include as a 3-of. Lee Sin will likely continue to play it for its defensive capabilities, especially now that Ai is not as easily replaceable, but that's the only immediate impact we're really going to feel, though we'll thank our lucky stars the next time a new Ionia deck is off lethal by 1, thanks to this nerf. There were actually more buffs than nerfs in patch 3.4, so buckle up as we've still got a lot more to cover, starting with Azir, whose level up condition is being adjusted from 13 units being summoned to 13 units or landmarks being summoned. This is a big buff for Mono Shurima, as Xerath now has some inherent synergy with another champion, and your Sun Disk will ascend quicker as it counts itself towards Azir's level up, as well as popular Shuriman staples like Unraveled Earth and Rockhopper. Even Azir Aurelia isn't getting left out, as Emperor's Dais now contributes towards the ascension of the Emperor. Though as cute as this change is, I'm not convinced of its overall meta impact. After all, you need to summon more than 3 landmarks in order for this to be faster than OG Azir, who, as good as he was, had very few decks built around him. And as cool as Xerath and Azir's new synergy is, I don't think we're looking at the combo outside of Mono Shurima, as Azir's level 2 doesn't actually synergize with Xerath very well, or the landmark archetype in general. Rumble has had his time at the ball as an aggro champion, and so a push is being made for a costume change and to open up the originally intended path of Mecha Yordles. All Mecha Yordles now progress Rumble's level up condition, which is important to remember that he is 1, so he'll still level up just as fast on his own, and some buffs are being offered to the Bandle City Pseudo-Celestials as well. 3 are gaining an additional attack. Lil Dipper, the Shadow Isle 6-drop who discards a unit and summons an exact copy on death, is now a 6-3, Dune Hopper mech, the Shuriman Sand Soldier summoning 5-drop, is up to a hearty 6 attack and health, and Trumpet Techer, the Demacian mech who grants your allies +1/+1 on summon, is now a 5/5. 2 more are gaining an additional health. Salty Spinner, the 3-mana stat shuffler from Bilgewater, now has 5 base health instead of 4, and finally Fury Horn Crasher, the on-attack Omen Hawk, is a 2-mana 3/3. It's hard to know how much these changes will solve the issues of the archetype, but it sure will be fun to find out firsthand, and it's nice to know that Mecha Yordles aren't getting completely abandoned after a rather disappointing release. Victor's Hex Core is getting a buff. It now costs 0, which is a huge buff for everyone's favorite scientist from Arcane. Previously, Victor could cost upwards of 11 mana to level up independently, while the Hex Core was something that would only benefit him, putting him several steps behind new keyword-focused champions like Pantheon. While many players were hoping for Victor to retain keywords between copies, this is a very large step that may prove to be enough to herald in the Age of the Machine Herald. While Lee Sin received some rather large nerfs in the form of Aphelios' champion spell, he's getting a slight buff back in Zoe's. Battlestar will now deal 5 damage up from 4, a nice little quality of life change that makes the spell on par with damage and mana cost when created by Sleepy Trouble Bubble. It is worth noting that Battlestar is an independent card that you can main deck without jumping through any hoops, but I think we all recognize this as a Constellation Zoe buff for Lee Sin. Quicksand is getting a pseudo rework and is probably one of my favorite changes this patch. Previously, this card would give one enemy unit -4 attack and disable its positive keywords, and you can now choose to do that or spread the love among 2 enemies for -2 attack each. As we'll get into in a bit, the nerfs to Demacia and Ionia are being compensated with buffs to some barrier cards within the regions, giving you one more reason on top of Pantheon and the newly buffed Victor to make Quicksand an appealing option. Now, this card has seen some fringe play in the past, mostly during elusive heavy metas, and the ability to spread the keyword negation is absolutely monumental against an archetype like that. I think Quicksand stands a chance at being the most powerful buff this patch, maybe rivaled by Aphelios. Now, I can't tell if that's a hot take or a cold take. For now, it's just my take, but please understand this is a 3-mana double hush with an attack reduction a non-insignificant amount of the time. She Who Wanders is back, I believe, to her full power of the original pre-beta weekend, as she has regeneration back from a few patches ago, and now once again obliterates champions as well as fallers. This is a full-on quality of life change for the card, by which I mean I don't expect this to impact her play rate at all. She's still just relegated to Targon's Peak, although maybe some Feel the Rush players will feel a little froggy and get crazy with her, but it's just one of these changes that's meant to make the card feel better when you do play it, not make you want to play it more often. Sheriff Lariat Rose is a card that I have seen cast on purpose a grand total of once, at the first EU Masters where it was played in Championless Undying. So the change from a 6/5 to a 7/6 without the addition of a keyword, kind of like we got on Mina Swiftfoot, feels completely irrelevant. This is the pack filler of a balance patch. Now, King Jarvan III, aka Jarvan's Boat, is getting a 2 additional attack and becoming an actual threat in its own right as a 7-mana 5/6 with Tough. Let's not mince words. 2 attack is a lot. With Shen's Boat also receiving a buff that we'll get to shortly, it seems that Shen Jarvan is getting pushed pretty heavily this patch, with an emphasis on letting you choose either or even both boats as a viable option for the deck. It's been a while since this deck was actually on my radar, but with the size and quantity of buffs coming through this patch, I'm not sure if it'll be able to be ignored much longer. Tattered Banner now skips over units who already have Challenger, which I didn't think was a problem, but they mention Quinn specifically, which makes sense. In Legends of Runeterra, if a unit summons another unit, then the second unit actually comes into play first, so in situations with this, you actually couldn't cast Tattered Banner on Quinn because Valor would always come in and eat the Tattered Banner first. Now with this change, it skips over the Valor, correctly goes onto Quinn, you can give your Quinn Challenger. Then we have Sacred Protector, which now gives an ally barrier on summon to give some immediate impact to the double attack it provides to allies with said barrier. I mean, it's no Jarvan III, but I guess I like the idea of everything that has Protector in its name giving something barrier on summon, but overall, obviously not going to complain about a change like this, as it does also help to level up the Shen if you happen to draw this card after you already have the Shen on field, similarly to how Jarvan III gives everything Scout if you already have Jarvan on field, which, again, a little bit more impactful. Sigil of Malice is down to 3 mana from 4, but importantly still costs 1 after the reputation requirement is met. Now, Noxus aggro has been performing fine as is and may not even be interested in a 3-mana Mystic Shot, and it's hard to tell which decks care about the flexibility of actually being able to hit face. See, Swain probably still prefers Death's Hand, and Tri-Beam Control likely still favors Pilt over Peacemaker and is uninterested in really overloading on 2-damage spells past that point, and aggro will probably still go Fervor for the flexibility of being able to dodge lifesteal on top of the fact that it is just 1 more damage. Surely something out there wants a 3-mana Mystic Shot, but I, for one, cannot tell what it is at this moment, especially not a Noxus deck. Calculated Creations, the 2-mana spell that creates an armed Gearbot, Ballistic Bot, or Neandroid, now gives the created unit +1/+1. While this is likely more of a pack filler change and one that's overall not going to affect the meta whatsoever, there may come a time where players are interested in running 6 copies of either Ballistic Bot or Neandroid, and this certainly helps anyone who has taken a ladder trying to replicate Victor's final boss deck from Lab of Legends. Now, as a group change for many cards, Flash Bombs are now placed in the top 8 of your opponent's deck rather than in the top 10, ideally giving more consistency to cards and letting you more realistically plan around hitting them in a timely fashion with your Ravenous Phlox, or if you're looking for a big Karina hit off of an actual trap deck, it's all going to work out just a little bit better now. Careful Preparations is now 2 mana instead of 3, and for those that don't remember this card, it's the one that lets you put a card from your hand on top of your deck, then predict and create a copy of that predicted card in hand. As a -1, this card was unplayable at 3 mana, and I am not totally convinced this card would even see play at 0 mana, let alone 2. Similarly, we have Camphor the Doubt, a 6 mana, now 6/5 up from a 5/4, that gains Spell Shield, Overwhelm, and Challenger if you've targeted allies in 4+ rounds when you summon it. It's important to note it will not gain the keywords if the condition is met after it's on the field, but overall it's hard to imagine this card in anything other than a Pantheon deck, but it also doesn't really fit into Pantheon decks currently. They're more characteristic of small faded or utility units you dump resources into before finishing off your opponent with a Pantheon, and Camphor feels like it's supposed to be a sturdy, difficult to remove challenger that chips away at your opponent. It almost feels more like a dragon card, but even dragons feel like they have better options. Maybe I've been getting spoiled these days, but an expensive challenger without a defensive combat keyword like Tough, Fury, Quick Attack, or Barrier just does not appeal to me. So that is going to do it for the buffs and nerfs, and then to round out the patch, of course, there are still a few more things in here. First off, we have Premonition, which is a little bit of a gameplay UX update, which is honestly confusing to me. So essentially, the sort of pitch that they've got here is we've all been there. Missing lethal or passing on block because you forgot about that pesky Dreadway, or a champion leveling up after committing an attack and you forgot to check the Oracle's Eye. With Nexus Health pre-visualization, you'll see exactly how much damage you're dealing or how much your Nexus is taking before it's too late. Now, the way that this reads to me is that it is like a reminder to check the Oracle's Eye. It is not necessarily any additional information presented once you are checking the Eye, because these are things that were already, sort of shown to you when you check the Oracle's Eye. So my understanding of these changes is that you should check the Eye more. Unit destruction pre-visualization, you'll get cracks in your units when they are about to die, which again, seems to me like if you don't check the Eye, you'll see cracks on your units that'll remind you to go check the Eye to, see that your 2/2 that is getting Mystic Shotted is dying. Overall, it's a little confusing to me. That's kind of how I read it. For the most part, I think this isn't really going to change the way that anybody plays. A lot of us are consistently checking that Oracle's Eye anyway, but it's definitely going to help out newer players that aren't really used to going to check the Eye. They're going to see some weird stuff on the board, be like, hey, that looks weird. What does this mean? Let me go check the Eye. Oh, my units are dying. My Nexus is dying. I forgot about the Dreadway. So obviously, I'm going to be okay with a change like this. Then we've got champion skins, arguably one of my favorite parts of the patch. Absolutely love cosmetics that we get in Legends of Runeterra. Infernal Shen coming in big. This is going to be the one with the new level up animation, and then Kennen coming in as sort of a one tier below that, where you've got new art for Mark of the Storm. And then we just have our new art champions. We have Pantheon, we have Galio, we have Swain. Swain, absolutely my favorite. Definitely going to pick that one up. We have the Magma Chamber board. Nice little piece of League of Legends meme history. The 1v1 map that never came. RIP Boulevard's professional League of Legends 1v1 career died to the lack of Magma Chamber. And then Guardians, we have the Infernal Poro, the Infernal Gloomtooth, and the Infernal Silverwing, sort of your base Guardians, all getting that nice little Infernal upgrade. Definitely going to grab that Poro, love that little guy. And then card backs, got the Ritual of Flames, a nice little Fireball. And then for bundles, of course, you can get all of the outside of game cosmetics, or you can get all of the skins together. And the featured deck bundle is going to be Shen plus Galio. I know that it looks like Jarvan, but it is actually Galio because Jarvan did not get an Infernal skin. And then Miscellaneous, of course, we've got some bug fixes down here. Nothing crazy. There were no game-breaking bugs or anything like that that it required a fix, but that is going to do it for me. Thank you so much for watching this little rundown of patch 3.4. Remember, the seasonal is coming up on May 14th and May 21st. You do not want to miss out on that. You want to be getting to Masters, getting your, however much LP you need for top 700, or completing your Prime Glories, as we have a little bit of an extended time period before the next seasonal. No excuse not to get your Prime Glories in. Get your LP up, whatever you got to do, get into this tournament because this meta is looking great. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Boulevard again for giantslayertv. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Ring that little bell notification to get notifications on when any video goes live on the channel. And comment down below, is there something that you felt was missing from this patch? Was there a change that you really liked, that you felt as passionate as I do about the quicksand change? Maybe you're really excited to try an Aphelios deck. Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.